Thank you for that. Welcome, everyone. You done? We good? All right. Welcome, everyone, to the June Orchestructure meeting. It was a little bit of a last-minute change-up as Brian Green from HashiCorp was not able to join. He will be coming another month. I'm not sure when, but he will be doing something, definitely, probably on Vault or something HashiCorp. Either way, we have Jared today, who is visiting again from last year's excellent talk in October on Palantir's then 10,000 hosts, EC2 hosts in AWS in production, and many other things that were going wrong. Now he's made it a little bit better with time. Just a little bit, though, just a little bit. Using Sensu and Datadog and doing some other really cool stuff that he'll talk about here as well. So definitely queue up your questions and feel free to ask him things. He's going to stay afterward a little bit as well because I told him to. And then Rex here wants to tell you how great tmux is, which I'm a huge proponent of tmux. Virtual terminals make things easier. And he's going to show you some tips that make your life a lot easier in terms of just dealing with lots of hosts, etc. So you're going to show them the synchronized panes thing where you can type into all of them.
That might be my grand finale.
Damn it, I'm ruining everything. So it should be a really good 5-10 minutes for Rex, and then 20 lightning talks not be over 10. No, so definitely with these guys, I'm not sure what they want, but usually if they're cool answering questions, you can ask questions in the middle of their talk. If not, feel free to queue them up and ask them afterward. Usually I have to ask everyone to leave at the end, which is fine. So stay, ask questions, talk amongst yourselves, and get some good feedback. Bathrooms are down that hallway, and then around the corner there. There is still some pizza left over, so please feel free to take seconds, thirds, and fourths if needed. And let's get started. Go ahead, Rex.
Hey guys, I'm Rex. I'm your opener. So once I'm done, you guys should all be super hyped for Jared. Okay, so I set up this repo. It's got my talk in it. My name's Rex. I've been using Unix for about 20 years or so, and I'm here to tell you why tmux is awesome. So what's a virtual terminal? A virtual terminal is basically like a window manager for your terminal. It takes all your shell processes and put that down the middle. Basically gives you a way to run multiple terminals, run multiple shells in one terminal. So the bad boy OG of virtual terminals is GNU Screen, and it came out in 1987, its first release. And like anything that came out in 1987, it feels very old school. It's very functional. I used it for over 10 years. But I like to liken it between VI and VIM. So Screen feels a lot like old school VI. tmux feels a lot like VIM with plugins and much better documentation and things like that. Though I'm not going to talk bad about Screen too bad because it's pretty awesome. And if I hadn't have switched jobs where everybody was using tmux, I probably would have never switched. So enough with all that junk. Let me show you tmux. So I started Alpine Container and put tmux in it because I didn't want to screw with my, I wanted to show you what the base looks like. So this is what tmux looks like. Looks normally like a terminal. So you got this bar at the bottom, and it's telling you, basically telling you you're in tmux. And when you're in tmux or any of these things, the first thing you have to do is hit to talk to and I'm telling you guys things you probably know if you've used Screen, but you have to send a control signal. So for tmux by default, it's control B. And then after that, you hit a command. So C, open the new terminal. You wouldn't have noticed anything except for that it just tells me down there I've got another one. So it's not a whole lot that I can do inside of an Alpine container, but I can show you, that these are definitely different containers or different terminals that I can jump back and forth between. So Screen is normally Control A, which after years and years of using Screen, Control A is like muscle memory built right in. And the guy who wrote tmux was a heavy Screen user, but he felt like it had this like crusty old Screen thing going on. So he wanted to make something new, and in order to make them not conflict, he changed the standard control key to B, which I think his heart was in the right place, but that was a big mistake. I think he made the wrong choice because I think, you know, when I first came to tmux, I was like, what is this? It's too complicated. It doesn't accept the things I'm used to with screen. But if you, that's true. It's a bit of more of a reach. But what I mean, if you change it to Control A, which is the first thing I do in my tmux config, it makes a huge difference. And you're suddenly, if you've got the key, remember the key combos from screen, tmux works great. Okay, so the other, you know, big feature of tmux is that you can make multiple panels, right? Which I'm forgetting the default keys. So yeah, each of these is different terminals, and right, which is awesome, you know. And I'll show you more of that later. I got to keep moving because this is short. Right. So the other thing you can do with tmux is you can detach, which is a huge thing. You can do this in screen too. So you detach those terminal processes are still running, and let's go back in and see. Put this thing on the screen so you guys can see what I'm typing. Yeah, so they're all there. So you could be running, you know, a long running program. You could start a database in there and just disconnect and then put that database in production, which may have happened at my work at one point. Don't do that. Actually, I thought about making this talk about replace your entire infrastructure with tmux because you could make it do systemd, you can make it do config management. We'll get there later. Okay, let's get out of this one. This one's still off this tmux. Right. So the other thing, this is my tmux that I normally use. Let's make it a little smaller so you guys can see the bottom. And you can see the bar down there is a little prettier. This is showing my battery of my laptop. It shows the time and the machine I'm on and my username and stuff like that. Borrows a lot from Powerline, if you guys are familiar with that. Let's make this a little bigger. Right. So another thing that tmux can do is it can be aware of the mouse. So if I make all these terminals, I can resize them using the keyboard, but I've never learned those controls because with the mouse, and this works in iTerm and it works in Terminal app. It also works in a lot of Linux terminals. You know, I can do things like this. I can resize these things. Mixing matrix. And, oops. Talk about copy and paste. So tmux has its own copy and paste buffer. Which is good because you can have, I like having the different context of like being able to paste things out of my OS or paste them out of the tmux or paste them in VI. Control A, right bracket to paste. And then I have set up Control A Y. And what that'll do is puts that paste buffer and dumps it into my OS so I can paste it somewhere else. Very useful. You guys are welcome to ask me questions, but
you ever been able to get it to automatically goes to your system like before?
You can do that. I don't know if I've done it personally, but I'm pretty sure you can do that because with the key bindings, and I can show you a little bit, but the way that key bindings work is that everything is scriptable that way. So so I'm almost positive you could do that. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm piping it to. Oh, there's a Mac utility.
PB copy.
Exactly.
Okay.
I actually have an abstraction script so that I can run it on Linux or on Mac, and it chooses which one. Okay, let's get into some other demos. I don't know if I want to. Yeah, let's do it. No one's going to kick me out. As long as Jared's happy, I can keep going. So, all right, this one, this actually is showing how tmux is scriptable. What it does is this creates a new session, and then it in that session it sends the keys to make this bash while loop, and in that while loop I'm running MongoDB. So there you go. This is how you could replace systemd. So this is running MongoDB, and we can actually let's go back to regular terminal app so I can do. Out of this Alpine container. List my sessions. I see my it's a Tango container, and there we go. We got Mongo running in tmux. You shouldn't do this, but it is kind of useful to do things like this because you could throw a script like that into cron, where it would run a process that runs on boot up or whatever in cron, and then you could get on that remote machine and load up tmux and see the output of that command, or if it's still running. There are probably a lot of better ways to do that, but you could do it in tmux. All right, let's talk about Kubernetes. Everybody loves Kubernetes. I've heard of it. Okay, so what this script does is it has these 3 commands, and it's gonna split my window, and then it's going to determine the window height, and then it's gonna run 1 command in the first window, and then these 2 commands in the other 2 windows. And the idea here, the reason why I came up with this example is because I was thinking, okay, I'm running Kubernetes. I want to run commands like Kelsey Hightower does in demos, and I want to show people that when I do I run some containers, they magically show up. Yeah, so this one's running just a, kube control get pods over and over again. This one's running ctop, and this one's running htop in my actual container host. So another interesting feature is you can zoom in on a container or on a panel. This pane has just been made full size, and htop is smart enough to redraw everything so it looks good. Yeah, Kubernetes is going crazy. This is actually the Docker for desktop Kubernetes. That's I've actually never looked at the processes and then a host, but I figured out how to run a htop in there. Let's delete it. Okay, then the last one. See if this works. I can, oh, be good if I was in the right directory. These are all in that repo, by the way. So if you want to run them or edit them or whatever you want to do. So this, you pass it a list of hosts on the command line, and then it'll launch a new window with the first host. It'll SSH to that host, and then it'll split the window up and run SSH in each one of those panes, and then it'll switch the layout to tiled, and then it does what Mario says, synchronized panes. And I'll show you what that means. Multi-SSH. So I had 6 hosts that were named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It would SSH to them. I actually do have 6 hosts named that. So these are all brand new EC2 instances. So let's say, I was debating what to do here. So
Of course.
there we go. We run tmux on all of them. And we're in tmux on all of them. I don't know. We could start making. Guys, help me. I don't know what's going on. Right. So, I mean, why do you need Ansible or Chef or Puppet? You can just SSH to all your hosts, type the exact same commands. Those machines are all going to be exactly the same. And away you go. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, that's it. That's my whole talk. I hope you guys at least try out tmux if you never have. If you're a heavy screen user, give it a shot because it's got, like I said, it's got a plug-in system. The config file makes a lot more sense to me. The man page is much more explanatory, though it is a really complicated tool. And like anything, tmux, the man page, it's hard to unpack all the complexity in a man page. But also, it's like VI, right? You only need to know like 2% of the things it can do, and it becomes super useful for you. So that's it. Thanks so much.
Terminology, right? So can you bring up just one of your tmux sessions to make one
that's it.
Or there you go.
Oh,
so,
one thing I didn't show is tmux is so useful to me. I get so annoyed if I'm in tmux, if I'm doing something in a shell and I'm not in tmux, that when iTerm starts for me, it just either attaches to a tmux or it execs tmux.
Okay, yeah, and there's like a ZSH plugin that I have for all my ZSH that actually will just, when you type tmux, it pulls your default, like your first session you made, so you're just always good to go there. And tmux also tells you when you try to execute tmux in tmux. It's like, hey, bud, stop.
That's why I jumped to terminal.
We need to talk.
Yeah.
So there's panes and windows and there's another one.
There's sessions.
Sessions, right? So a session is a singular session that.
So a session would be like the parent tmux process. You could have multiple sessions, and tmux does a lot. Like you can do this in Screen also, but the single screen process is not really knowledgeable about the other screen sessions. Whereas in tmux, that 0 down there means I'm in the 0 session. And honestly, that's way too complicated for me. I'm like, if I got like 10 windows open here on tmux, that's more than my brain can take care of. So, but each of those down there is a different window. That's what you're asking. So, you can see my demos still there. Right, and then each of these is a different pane. Right, and every single one is its own shell process. Though I don't want to get
that's exactly it. Yeah, definitely very, very powerful. I like to have lots of windows. I only have one session ever. And then I just have as many windows as I need. A window is for a purpose generally, and that will have different panes for that purpose, like that example there with deploying containers.
I will say that when I first tried tmux, probably in like the late 2000 aughts, if you want to call it that, is things like this would have never worked. Like they had these panes, but like true like curses and incurses stuff, I feel like would crash tmux.
Yeah.
And because it was so young, I think that drove a lot of people away. It drove me away, but they've solved some of that.
Yeah, and you can rename all your windows too down there. It's just the your shell will be bash, right? So
yeah.
I eat too much pizza.
Well, if I'm running commands, like if I have Python run there, OpenVPN, whatever things, they change those.
Yeah.
It changes that.
One last thing that I like to do is I actually have, so you can template how you want your tmux to look. So you can actually write up a template that says, I want 6 different windows with 4 panes on this one, 6 panes on this one, 9 on this one. You can even size them, how big they are. And you can actually launch tmux and have it automatically pull that in. So when you reboot your computer, you can basically get back the number of windows, them named in a certain way, all of that if you want to. It's kind of a templating feature that came out a few years ago. It's super powerful. I use it. I can do Control-A-F and load 4 panes, right, all equal sizes, and I can just get going kind of thing. So it's super powerful.
Questions?
What's your thought on is it tmuxinator? Like help
I haven't used that. Is that one of the wrappers for the?
Yeah, it seems like helps makes designing your panes and stuff like that easier.
Gotcha.
I've not used that.
I haven't used it either.
It changes the configuration file too
for you, because it's super dense.
Still weight space.
You should link that in the Orchestructure Slack if you can. That'd be super helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I did link to I don't love my tmux config, but it's in there. I linked to there's a guy who has that I borrowed from when I first built it. He calls it opinionated tmux config. And it is, and it works, but I would like to make it a bit simpler.
I
just didn't have time.
I think all of us have one of those. So
right.
Awesome. Thank you very much, sir. Yeah. That was awesome. Cool. You ready, Jared?
Yeah.
Front and center. You in the Hangouts as well? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Well, I'm focused on us, like my laptop, so you can join in, share your screen, and then when you're good, I'll focus back onto you. Just make sure that your mic is up, and you can turn off your camera.
You see that?
And now it's a dongle person, so
if you're using it, you might be doing things wrong. That's kind of how I've seen it, but it's not a bad thing for sure. So
all those dongles for you.
Well, this one actually has some fancy firmware that when you first buy it, you then have to like update
Wait for it to actually,
and you can't unplug it. Someone from Houghton's calling me.
Interesting.
I'm sorry, did you say that dongle has firmware?
Yeah, so it updates if you go and buy them, and then you can't unplug it while it's doing it, otherwise you'll break the device. It's quite exciting. What am I doing here? Sharing my screen? Nope, that's not it.
Is your audio good? It looks like
his audio is good, but he needs to share his screen.
Okay, cool.
And then
that should be good.
Did that work?
Yep, and then watch this. Inception-y for a second. I swear. It's broadcasting you.
Oh, so like if I just do.
Yep. You're good.
Huh? Shit.
Cool. All right.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, you're good to go, man.
That's like the first time that's ever worked. Sweet. Hi, I'm Jared Ledvina. I work at Palantir Technologies as a cloud operations engineer. I graduated from Michigan Tech back in 2015 as a computer network and systems administrator. My call sign is Kilo Kilo 6 Yankee Juliet Alpha. And if you know any other ham radio people, they'll always be telling you their call sign. Nice. So him and I are going to hang out after. I'm a student pilot at Michigan Flyers, which we're on this side of the city, so it's just over there, out of the Ann Arbor Airport. Still have a private pilot's license, but I'm working on that. And the new thing for this year is that I'm the lead maintainer for all of the Ansible code that all of Sensu Inc. runs. So I get this sweet-ass shirt with maintainer on it.
For all of us?
So I only have really old stickers, and there's not in this backpack. So yeah, we're just gonna move forward. I'll come back someday with stickers. Cool. So the standard disclaimer, I made this on my own time. All of my views don't reflect anything of the company that I work for. And if you want to reuse any of the content in this slide, let me know and we can discuss it then. So legal stuff out of the way. Why am I talking to you? Palantir continues to grow rapidly. Last year we were growing very fast. This year it feels like someone's even pushed that accelerator through the floor. And we continue to have tons of instances, tons of scaling problems, and lots of pain, but also lots of wins. So it's fun just to kind of recap where we were last year and then come and show where we've come from then. We've deployed a ton of incredible technologies, and I'll be touching primarily on one, Sensu, but also I'll touch on Datadog and some of the other stuff we've done. And of course, we always learn lessons the hard way. So what is Palantir? This is mostly a recap from last year for folks who weren't able to attend or weren't part of Orchestructure back then. Palantir is a software company based out of Silicon Valley. We're headquartered in Palo Alto, California. However, we have offices all over the world. So I work remote out of Ann Arbor, so it's just my apartment. But we have offices in DC, Palo Alto, San Francisco, LA. We've got London offices. We've got one in Abu Dhabi. We've got them all over. Our tagline is basically we help investigators solve the world's hardest problems. And we like to empower people to use technology to leverage their human intellect and their ability to look at large visual problems and actually make sense of it, but leverage the computers to actually process all of that data and kind of come up with those visualizations. So we continue to allow people to do what they're really good at, but leveraging the computers to do all the compute, the mathematics, everything like that. And a lot of it runs in the cloud, not all of it, but a lot of it, and that is quickly expanding. So last year, when I gave the presentation, we were at 8,100 instances. I had to go pull my slides up from last year. So I just pulled this number. We were actually at 12,511 as of an hour ago. That's running in production. That doesn't include staging. That doesn't include development. If I added it all over, we just broke 13K. That's a lot of EC2 instances running in many, many AWS accounts all over the world. Last year, we had just started supporting CentOS 7. I think we had maybe 2% of the fleet running CentOS 7. We had just kind of entered that realm right around when I gave that presentation. We just surpassed 50% mark. So people have been rebuilding hosts, decomming old ones, replacing them with shiny new CentOS 7 boxes. So that's a huge win for us. That kernel was released within the last decade. That's pretty cool. And it comes with Python 2.7, which means I can do a dict comprehension, which is a new shiny thing. So we also support 13 AWS regions now. Last year, I think it was around 8. So we've expanded our footprint just in that sense. Supporting a new AWS region is actually pretty trivial on our end. It's just name a few things and add some more variables, and we're good to go. And primarily the focus of this presentation is the ways that we've overhauled our configuration management and our monitoring platforms to kind of facilitate a more dynamic environment, but also make it easier in the everyday engineering. And I'll be touching on that for the most part during this talk. So to start off, config management. The big ones are last year we were running on Puppet 3.8.2. We are finally on Puppet 5.5.1. And for those of you who are not Puppet folks, that is going from the pre-dawn eras to finally being able to do for loops and really complex data structure manipulation. I can use Hera, which if you're not familiar with, it's just merged YAML effectively is a trivial way to explain it. So you can take a bunch of YAML files and be based on their name, merge them in this way and then give me the resulting like merged hash or array or something. So we went from 1 to 5. That unlocks tons of potential, which I don't need to get into unless people really care, but effectively allows us to be very flexible in the way that we use these variables and template it out in our infrastructure. We run PuppetDB, and last year I mentioned that it was effectively cheap service discovery. So like with PuppetDB, I can say like this node is blah with this IP, and then from another node I can go look it up. That costs a lot. That's a ton of network traffic, and it's a huge Postgres query. We've been doing a ton of like analyzing of those Postgres queries and actually built into our Puppet code custom Postgres querying language such that those are much more optimized to our environment. They do a lot of like glob lookups and handling of more data than they need to, and we know our environment the best, so we kind of manipulated that to be much better. With the upgrade to the latest version of PuppetDB, plus all of those optimizations, we cut that by 50%, which means we no longer have to run the largest RDS instance that's available on EC2. We can now run a moderately sized one. So that just saved the company a bunch of money. And then we deployed, an engineer on my team worked on a bunch of fancy Ruby stuff, and we deployed across all of our modules, which I don't have the count of, but I'm pretty sure it's somewhere up in the 40s, and those are just like internal custom Puppet modules, automated unit and like regression testing. So it's not perfect, but it does like some basic like compile time stuff to make sure that the module like is more than syntactically valid, that the module will compile into real usable Puppet code. And that saves us a ton of iteration time where it's like you submit a change, the build runs, it passes, and then you take that change and you like no-op it in Puppet's no-op mode, and then it just blows up because you mistyped a variable. So that's just like a huge time saving like over the course of months. And then I pulled this number just before I came here. We've done 4,900 commits to our Puppet code alone within the last 8 months. And a lot of those are squashed merges. So every pull request I make, I squash merge it because it's usually just a bunch of swear words and then like, holy shit, I got it. So usually I just squash merge that and make a nice clean commit. It saves everyone the headache of dealing with my nonsense. But yeah, that's where we've come with configuration management. I'm really excited for it. The changes already are getting better and better. And with just the basic automated testing, I can't really explain in words how much time that's saving everyone across the board. And we're going to continue improving that. I've already started adding tests where it's like, ensure that like by default variables evaluate to this crazy thing. That's mostly for OS query. If people are very interested, I could go into that. But it works out really well. And then next up, monitoring upgrades. This is my baby. This has been my big project over the last 8 months. We re-architected and deployed into production a Sensu monitoring platform that is replacing a very legacy Nagios installation. It's a single host. It runs on a single instance. It's backed by a single EBS volume. It is a single point of failure in all of the various ways that you could build a single point of failure, and it runs all of our critical production monitoring. It does go down, and when it goes down, we have no idea what's going on, except that Nagios is down, and everything's probably following along with it. There was a US East AZ outage 2 weeks ago, I think. And if you are in AWS and you weren't affected by that, congrats. If you are us, you are affected by that. One AZ does bring down some stuff. Luckily, it wasn't Nagios, so we saw what fell over. But my first instinct was like, is Nagios running? Because if it's not running right now, we are screwed. So that's really exciting. Last year, during the presentation, before I had come, I had just merged a Datadog rollout PR, which had just started it into internal testing. That was completely successful. We rolled that out to the entire fleet. We then deprecated our entire in-house self-hosted monitoring solution, which was OpenTSDB backed with T-Collector and Grafana. And has anyone ever run OpenTSDB? No. All right. Well, uses HBase. It's all Hadoop based. It was very legacy. It was also very slow. Because it was hosted in-house, we didn't get all of the fun like add-ons that Datadog gives you, which is like doing cool aggregate lookups, or you can like predict out like where will this value be based on its last week of performance in 2 weeks from now. We do use that specifically for disk usage to alert on some critical hosts where we don't want the disks completely filling up and like causing some issues. But there's a lot of other cooler things where you can like, based on the response time of this application, can I predict in 2 hours like where that usage will be based on the last week of profiling it? And you can kind of look for like, oh, we're having a traffic spike, and we've always had a traffic spike around 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and now we've started hovering up to where that's actually going to become a problem. So Datadog is incredibly powerful, and it's like allowing us to do a lot of stuff. And kind of roped into the Sensu thing, we're starting to design and like roll out our own self-healing and auto-remediation frameworks. So it builds on the core principles of Sensu, which is like being very flexible, but allowing us to automatically, like the simple like one that we just did was syncing the time of a host. So like we alert if the time of any host wavers outside of half of a second, and then it becomes critical if it wavers within a second. So now we automatically sync the time, and then we do alerting and reporting based on like how often that's happening, and if it's actually happening a ton, then maybe someone should look into it. But outside of that, who cares? We're still syncing the time. We're fine. So I'll go more into Datadog, although I feel like I just kind of rambled through a big part of that. Like I mentioned, OpenTSDB was a 13-node cluster. It was running on C3 8x larges. It was ooming all the time. It was a huge pain in the ass to maintain. It's supposed to be highly available, but if one node went down, all reads from the cluster stopped. We killed all of that. We don't use any of that anymore. I decommed all of those hosts, being incredibly happy to hit terminate. And I went to the council to hit terminate. There was no like CLI. I wanted to see that button get pressed to kill those instances. So that was very exciting. And by doing that, we were able, and we rolled out the Datadog agent. So like, I don't know how familiar everyone is with Datadog, but every single host runs the agent. We're running the V5, which is just a Python daemon. It collects stock system metrics out of the box with a bunch of different integrations that you can kind of set up. So like common ones would be like collecting CPU count. That's not directly enabled by default, but you can turn that one on. But you do more advanced things like collect RabbitMQ metrics, Redis metrics. Basically, all of like the well-known applications have pre-built-in ones. And then you can take the next step, which is writing your own custom integrations. The thing that we're seeing with Datadog is we've never before seen like such a huge cross like company like collaboration on like actually like a data-driven approach. At Palantir, we tout the culture of a data-driven approach, but in incidents, because like it's effectively like everything's on fire, fix it as fast as you can go. We didn't take the time to like, oh, let's go build out a Grafana dashboard to like track all of this. It was like just tail the logs and like pipe it through WC-L and like just count how many errors are happening right now and just go with it. With Datadog, because it's so easy to use and it's always there, it's not as slow as the OpenTSDB cluster, we're able to like actually have like real-time analytics happening while we're making changes and while we're trying to improve like a situation. And it's quite fun to be in like a Nginx issue like outage where like the front door for a customer isn't responding in time. And not only do I have like Nginx perf metrics, which I had before, but now I have profiling on all the apps that it's serving. And I have like an aggregate view of like what's the full stack and the full stack's performance and like where is potentially the bottleneck. Sometimes it's still not clear. It's not a magic bullet, but a lot of the times it does help you isolate like specific latency points to actually be able to nail that down. So it's incredibly empowering and a lot of fun just to stand back and watch, but also more fun to be involved with, where it's like actually like we know the problem, we're just going to address that and fix it. So we're resolving issues faster than we ever have. And we're using actual data to really drive those decisions, which is empowering. Yeah, and then conversely to that, when things aren't totally breaking down, which is like 50% of my life, the other 50% is when things are actually working well. We use the performance metrics in Datadog to analyze changes. So when we roll out updates to like some daemon or a config change or a bunch of the new popular one is like, let's tweak every sysctl change or every sysctl setting. And half the time, no one really knows what we're changing, but it's just like, yeah, a TCP window timeout maybe should be a less couple of seconds. But by using Datadog, we can actually like look at network performance metrics and try to gauge whether or not it's actually doing something or if it's just like a perceived notion that it is somehow helping. And I think we're about 50-50 on some of those. So a lot of the times we're actually able to squeeze out more performance out of like Cassandra or Elasticsearch, but a lot of the other times it's just kind of, why did we change that? Why did we spend all that time doing that? So that's quite fun. And then outside of that, we also are looking at like profiling our Puppet runs, profiling other various like agents that we run to kind of improve the system performance, to squeeze out more of what we're paying for, because we're paying a bunch, so we might as well get as much out of those instances as we can. Yeah, and then because of that, it basically fundamentally changes the way that we're rolling out changes. Once you have all of this insight, like it's hard to express in words the value there without you really witnessing that. Before you're half flying blind, you've got logs maybe, you can like go to the hosts and see what they're doing. But when you can pull up an average aggregate of like a particular type of host and then roll out a change and then watch that actually affect stuff, it really changes the dynamic of the team. And that's what I've been really excited to see, is like now the team's not just guessing, or it's not like, oh, so-and-so read on some blog and that was published in 2013 that changing this thing might help us. Now it's like actually like, cool, we're gonna graph that, and then we're gonna roll it out. And if it doesn't work, we're gonna stop doing that because it's just a waste of time. So for me, that's like my favorite part is like we're actually changing production, and I can watch a graph get better or get worse. And that does happen. They do get worse sometimes. Anyone have questions on Datadog? Am I talking too fast? It's the other one. All right, I've had a ton of coffee. Every slide should have a picture of coffee on it, except for like 2. So feel free to indulge yourself in that. But onwards to Sensu. So Sensu is my favorite thing. I've been running it for 5 years. I started way back in college on some crazy beta that was only like kind of working, but like also didn't work. I also didn't know what I was doing. And I followed it for many years all the way up till now. I've been active in the community because I really enjoy that community. It's a bunch of people like us. Right? We're all DevOps. Everyone gets paged. And everyone in those rooms always gets paged. So it's fun when there's someone in one of those rooms. Way back then it was IRC, now it's Slack. It's just like, hey, Sensu is like flooding me with keep alive alerts. It's like, I know that feeling. And I know what it's like to be on call, and I will help you because I kind of feel bad, but I also want you to get out of that. So it's an empowering community, and everyone's really in it together, which is fun. But more towards like what is Sensu as like a technology, it's really like the best way to frame it is it's a monitoring engine. It doesn't shoot to be like something you install and just solves all of your problems. It should just be something that you install and run that allows you to solve all of your problems. So like it won't come out of the box and be like monitoring your custom apps and like doing application performance metrics on like all of your like Python code. It won't like actively solve all of your problems, but what it does is it unleashes that potential by giving you like this generic API to build on top of to actually like build more automation and custom tooling around. It's similar in the vein to Kubernetes, where like it gives you that solid standard API to kind of like build against and work against and teach your developers how to work against, such that like not everyone's doing their own bespoke thing. And it is that in the sense of the monitoring like realm. So this is like the official thing I pulled off the site, and you can read that if you want, or you can just go to the site and read it. But like my TLDR is just that it's pretty badass and very powerful. So I think this is actually like a GIF, which will play while I talk. So what I want to do is like break down the components, because you say Sensu, but like no one fully understands it. What I am, just for clarity, referring to is Sensu version 1. They're currently writing version 2, which is a Go rewrite. It uses etcd under the hood, and it knocks out the bottom 2 dependencies and combines the server and the API and the dashboard Uchiwa into one. So what you end up with in the Go rewrite is actually just 2 components versus all of this. But this is the classic Sensu. This is the Sensu I know and love. Sensu client's like the power engine. It's just like the Datadog agent. You roll it out to everything. It runs on all of those hosts. It's written in Ruby. It comes with its own embedded Ruby runtime, which is really useful when you're running on CentOS 6 like I am. And Ruby is at version 1.8.7, which if you're in the Ruby world, that's ancient. It's probably also got security holes. We probably don't want to talk about that. But Sensu gives you like 2.4, which is way newer, and you can do tons more stuff on. And it just comes with the client install. So you just install the package and it's there. The client can do tons of different things, from just scheduling checks. So it can by itself just operate as a standalone thing and just like run checks for you and then submit those like results. You can also open up an HTTP, a TCP, or a UDP socket for which external things can throw JSON events to as a check result. So we leverage that a ton. We run everything via cron because that's how we did it with Nagios. And what I was able to do is just tee into that process where it's like submit it to Nagios, and then if that was successful, try to submit it to Sensu. And I even broke that if condition. So it's just like try to submit it to Nagios, now just go for Sensu. And the nice thing there is that by just teeing off in one position, I was able to get all the check results. Because Sensu doesn't have like a very bespoke model of designing and configuring and defining what your check results actually should look like versus Nagios, where it's like, what are all of my hosts? Which when it's 12,000, that's a huge file. And then what are all my checks that I should expect for all of those hosts? And like, what is the very intricate relationship between all of those? With Sensu, you can just kind of have the clients report all of that. And when you want to start doing alerting and stuff, you just tell Sensu, cool, when check Nginx goes like critical page, but when the NTP time is out of sync, just fire off this command to sync the time. And if that fails, then let us know. So the client kind of is the magic for me behind all the scenes, where the client is like this small process that runs, but it does unleash a ton of potential. Now the client integrates with like the rest of the ecosystem with like the server and the API. And what this GIF tries to show it's at the, okay, so like this is the beginning of it. And it's like the server submits check HTTP, which these report back the results through using RabbitMQ. And then the API can fetch it from, this is Redis, for those of you who don't know that logo. It's kind of an iffy GIF, but it's like the best visual representation of like how that all works. The server is simply there to process all of the results that land on RabbitMQ and to put on check requests. And then the API is just your fancy RESTful, full JSON, very responsive API that's just backed by Redis. So the API is fun because if you've used Nagios, those CGI wrappers that have to process that status.dat file are incredibly slow. And when you have 12,000 hosts reporting checks, it takes about 22 seconds to do a single request to those APIs, which at 22 seconds, you're effectively now configuring timeouts for every single HTTP call you've ever done because everything just times out thinking that the service is down. Including your browser, which is the more fun one. Between Nginx and your browser, Nginx starts thinking that Nagios is down, and it's really just that slow to operate with. With Sensu, using the same check results, monitoring the same environment, the actual response time of that is sub 1 second versus the 22 seconds that we're seeing with Nagios. So just from an operational perspective, like people are inclined to go to Sensu to like look at the state of the world versus they're turned away from Nagios because waiting for your browser to refresh for 22 seconds is very, very painful. And we have people on my team who will opt to not downtime a check because it will take so long to get to that they can just go fix it, have the alert fire, and then have the clear come through before their browser would even load it. And like to me, that's just like the end of the world at that point. Like, why even have it? So yeah, the Sensu server and the Sensu API kind of play off of each other in that sense. Uchiwa, I have a little thing about that somewhere. No. Maybe. We'll see if I can get there. Oh, no. We'll see if I can get there. But Uchiwa is the web dashboards built on Go. It's got a lot of nice visual representation of like what's going on in your environment, and it leverages the Sensu API. And then RabbitMQ is the real magic. I've never used RabbitMQ before. I've only heard horror stories. So that was my worst fear about going to production. Turns out that RabbitMQ, the latest versions, are pretty powerful, and we're processing, I think I've got on the next slide, thousands of messages a second. And RabbitMQ is not even blinking an eye. As long as it's got enough memory, that queue flies, and that's a lot of fun. And then Redis is the state. So Redis is the only state stored in the entire system. The rest of it can burn down, and Redis just kind of has to sit around. Because at the end of the day, you do need to know like what checks did we downtime and for how long, or which checks did that team acknowledge because they know that it's an issue, but like don't want to be actively notified about it. So Redis is where that state is actually stored, and it stores the last 21 check results as well. And that's nice for doing comparisons over like the series. So it's like, has this fired 20 times, has this fired 5? So what we do is we leverage Elasticache. I think I've got that over here. No, I don't. We leverage Elasticache. I effectively know up to that problem. I was like, Amazon, we'll pay you money. You deal with this. I don't want to store state. I want stateless instances. So we have that. So this is kind of like the world's not greatest representation of how it works, but I tried. This is cloudcraft.co if you're looking to do this with your own environment. But what I'm trying to show here is like we have like Palantir deployment VPCs. They submit check. This host would run the Sensu client, submit over an encrypted RabbitMQ like connection to a publicly facing Rabbit like an AWS NLB, which is just like a network load balancer, and then send that back to currently only 2 of the 3 Sensu nodes. And that is due to a very poor design decision that was made back in 2014. I can't control that. I can fix it, but I can't control it. So then this is my 3-node cluster split over the 3 AZs. Any node can go down. The rest of the cluster fixes it, except if these 2 nodes go down, then this guy's going to freak out. And actually, if you know anything about RabbitMQ, a single node of RabbitMQ running when it thought it was in a cluster stops itself from receiving events as well because it doesn't know if it's the last one in a network split or if it is the only one. So because it can't decide that and actually interpret that logic, because it'd be impossible, it just stops itself and it's like, nope, I'm not doing anything. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, yeah. And there's like different ways to configure that as well. So you could set it up such that if like 2 nodes are left, or if you had like a much larger cluster, you could handle network partitions and things like that in a different way. But because I was able to pull off 3 instances to power 12,000 nodes, I stayed with 3 instances. It's actually working out really well. And if this ever starts failing me, we'll just add more. Specifically in these 2 AZs, because this one is a dumpster fire. But yeah, I didn't realize this going into it, just so we're clear. I didn't know that this was going to become a problem, but now that that's a problem, I'm going to kill that node and move it over here. But yeah, they're only C5X larges, which is like not too big for our environment. We have hosts running i3 2X larges or even larger. We were running the largest RDS instance ever. So when I deployed this, I started with C5 larges, ran out of memory a little bit, so I bumped it, and now it's running fine. And they're probably the smallest prod instance that's handling probably the most traffic for like aggregate in the ops infrastructure. Lots of deployment hosts will handle much more than I'm talking about. But for what my team directly manages, this is like a unique situation. So it's cool to see that I can run the C5s, which are just cheaper on the AWS platform and only have to go up to the extra larges to like squeeze out all the performance for a pretty low cost. Elasticache supports encryption in transit, which is like a unique feature. If you want to do Redis with encryption in transit, you're looking at running like S-tunnel or some sort of like proxy to encrypt it in transit, because the Redis devs refuse to add TLS support to their product, which is fine because Amazon solved that problem for us. And then I worked with the CTO of Sensu to add support to Sensu for that. So if you get 1.4.0, you get that fixed as well. And that's pretty exciting because that checked a whole box for the InfoSec team. And like I mentioned, this is just an NLB. NLBs are a little bit new to like the AWS platform, but they can theoretically process millions of packets a second or something like that. Whatever it is, it's way more than what I need, and it works out perfectly. And right now we're about like an average of 1,000 messages a second, but that average is like over a decent time span because most of our checks run either on 5-minute intervals, a lot run on 15-minute intervals, and then there's some that come in every hour. So when all of those combined together run at the same time, it's like more than 1,000 messages a second. But they all back up. RabbitMQ buffers that, and then the Sensu servers pick off all the messages and spit them out. And like our average latency there only gets up to about like 4 seconds between when a message is created and when it's finally processed and available in Sensu. So that's how I did it. Questions on that?
Is there a lot of overlap between what Datadog is monitoring, what Sensu's monitoring?
Yeah. So that has been the ongoing debate, especially on my team, but also around the company as well, is like, why is my team investing in Sensu when we already are paying for Datadog? And that is a completely valid debate. Like Datadog provides monitoring out of the box. You can do service checks. You can check to see if like SSH is running. You can check to see if your favorite daemon is running. And then if you're pulling metrics, you can alert on all of those metrics. And in an ideal world, that's actually where you would go. The restriction for us is that due to a bunch of compliance concerns, we can't actually control who can monitor and change those alerts. So if any of you have Datadog like accounts, know that anyone in that platform can edit any of those monitors. They can disable them, they can downtime them, they can throw up the values. The only alerts you can get out of that is by checking a single box that will be alert me when edits are made to this. And if someone's clever or just annoying, they can uncheck that box. You'll get an alert for that, and then you'll get no alerts for whatever else they did. The other blocker for us was controlling the ongoing state of all of those monitors was kind of a tricky story because we wanted to control ours but not affect everyone else's. And what we also didn't want was external dependencies impacting the way we were monitoring. So what we were trying to like effectively come up with is our own Datadog. And you can't tee off agent results into 2 dedicated Datadog accounts without paying them for double the amount, which would be insane, and running effectively 2 agents at once. And effectively, we just hit all of these blockers, and we're like, screw it, like we'll do it ourselves. The ending argument that won it in our favor was that once the data leaves our ecosystem, Datadog can't reach back in. And that's for many security and compliance reasons, but like Datadog can't post a webhook into our environment. They can't do anything with our environment. We only allow very specific traffic to go out, and once it's out, it's out. And what we wanted to do was a lot of auto remediation and self-healing because we're finally to the scale where 12 people versus 12,000 instances is a losing battle. They love to break, we love to go to sleep, and while we sleep, they love to blow up even more. So we opted for this, and it's working out really well. But yeah, it's a total, like in other organizations, that might absolutely work. You might be able to have webhooks back into your environment. You might be able to have a small enough company that like you can trust Billy, Joe, Bob on like the engineering team that you don't even know who just got hired to not go in and mute all of your alerts. But for us, it just didn't actually end up working out. Other questions? Okay.
Do you reach into multiple accounts? Does your company have multiple AWS
Yeah.
accounts?
Yeah, so I don't think I can give you like a specific number, but I can tell you that it's way over 100. And
you use those 3
yeah,
Sensu's things to
monitor them all. Yeah, so it's like I'm really proud of it. And most of it, like the real magic is the NLB. So the NLB supports static IPs. So when you provision it, and I used Terraform to spin up quite a bit of this infrastructure, except for the instances due to internal things. But when I made the NLB, you can say allocate an EIP for each AZ that the NLB will be sending like traffic to. So for this one, it gets 2. And with an EIP, like I can be guaranteed that that never changes. So it's like a known destination point to start flinging traffic at. And then there, like you can configure it such that like it does cross like AZ like load balancing. And it's performant enough that I've never had issues. There's like an ongoing issue that we're having with AWS where apparently C5s and M5s on an internal NLB, not one that's facing publicly like to the internet or that's internet accessible. But if it's internal only, there'll be a ton of like ACK resets coming from the NLB, I think is the problem. We were TCP dumping it, trying to figure out what was going on. But there is a bug. If you're in AWS and you're running M5s or C5s and you have internal NLBs, there's a problem currently with the way that that TCP transmission works. So switch to the 4 series and you're fine.
So you said they're running the full stack, so you have Redis, everything.
Redis I offloaded to AWS Elasticache, so I killed that dependency. But yeah, then it runs Uchiwa, the API, the server, and RabbitMQ on C5X larges, and it is fine. Yeah, so the C5s and the M5s are all Nitro-based. They're all the KVM magic. And we had a dedicated SRE who worked on that for like a month to reconfigure our whole AMI build pipeline to support that and ENA, because that's like a kernel thing. And there's like a bunch of magic that he had to do to make that work with CentOS 7, and it only works with CentOS 7. But now we fully support the full range, and we support converting between them, which I was really impressed with. He was able to pull it off such that you can go from C4 to C5, and like all of the magic follows along, and like you don't actually have to build brand new C5 instances. Yes.
Are you doing anything on bare metal at all?
So within the company we are, but I'm not on any of those teams. Just my team just does all cloud.
I mean, so I'm thinking especially of the AWS bare metal offering.
Oh no. So that just came out. Yeah, we haven't looked at that at all. We're actually just shooting to support the M5D and the C5D instances that have that extra local NVMe storage for like scratch data or whatever. Other questions? Yeah.
How many agents do you have on each host total? Datadog plus Sensu plus the backup and the security. And
yeah, a bunch.
More than 10?
Oh boy.
What is the ratio of resources that those?
I know. So that was a legitimate concern though. You're like, that's a legit thing, right? Like how many agents are you going to run before the host like needs to be scaled up to just support the basic load? What I can say is we can't support T2 micros or most of the T2 fleet. The hosts just will not survive that. And like that comes at like a cost, like that costs us more money now because now we're running real things that like cost quite a bit. I couldn't give you a number off the top of my head. I just offhand I know it's more than 5. And that's a good question though. I like that.
There's still no master agent for all other agents.
I wish. So like some of like Sensu has this concept of extensions where you can write native Ruby code, and then when it launches, it loads that straight into the runtime. Super sketchy if you screw it up because you'll crash the entire runtime, but it's super powerful if you know what you're doing because you can do a lot of stuff. So like theoretically, like you could just use the Sensu client to post data to Datadog, and there's like native integrations to support workflow like that. At our scale, pushing all of our metrics through this pipeline as well would probably mean that this cluster is not as small as it is. And probably has to be completely scaled out differently. But yeah, like at the end of the day, we've worked around that. But I mean, that's a totally fair question that I might go look at just for fun to like profile all of the system agents. Because Puppet alone, I know like when Puppet executes Yum transactions, it eats up a ton of memory. I blame Yum because I think Puppet's much better, but like that's like an ongoing problem where boxes run out of memory. The Puppet runs fail because Yum fails because there's not enough memory, and it's like great. Like now we have to tell someone to resize their box. But yeah, yes.
You said that Sensu 1 is in Ruby and other things, and Sensu 2 will be in Go.
It's completely in Go, completely rewrite.
What's the timeline for that? Do they have any idea?
So right now it's a public beta. So you can go get it. It's the github.com/sensu/sensu-go. You can download it, you can install it. They've got RPMs, they've got Debian packages. The GA, the last I heard, and hopefully no one from Sensu watches this, but I'm pretty sure it was near the end of the year. I hope I'm accurate on that. And for context, the CTO and the CEO retweeted the Orchestructure tweet, which freaked me out because I don't have new swag. So this is the old logo. But yeah, I'm pretty sure like near the end of the year is when they're shooting for GA. And their current push, to my knowledge, is feature parity matching the filtering that you can do with Sensu. So like with Sensu, you can say like simple things like has this alert fired 5 times? If not, like don't do anything. But you can do really complex native Ruby eval statements in those filtering functions such that you can run real live running Ruby code and do a bunch of stuff. You can't do that in the Go implementation because it's written in Go. So it's a totally different language, totally different barrier to entry. So they're trying to look at like how can you do like maybe a plugin system, and they're trying to work through that. And then they're also looking at re-overhauling the dashboard, which I don't know if I can show you because I think Keynote's completely locked this in. But the dashboard's Uchiwa and it's pretty cool. But yeah.
I was wondering, is there a transition path for all the plugins and
So,
things like that that are written in Ruby now?
Yeah, they just released the Sensu migration tool, which takes V1 configs, which are just JSON files, and spits out the V2 equivalent. So it like translates the check name to this and like the other things, and then it'll flag, I'm pretty sure, the things that can't translate easily. Excuse me. So there is like an easy like migration path there. They've feature parodied to the most part everything that Sensu 1 does, except for filtering and extensions. I think those are the last 2 basic things that they need to like work out on like what the story is there, because those are very unique to like the Sensu 1 ecosystem being in Ruby. But yeah, you can translate your configs and you can run it. I run both because I just hate myself. So I run Sensu 1 and Sensu 2 and they both monitor the same things. It's kind of fun. It's fun to be part of like the whole beta, like, oh, this is broken software. I'll let someone know because they're actively writing code for this. So yeah. Any other people? Anyone? All right. Yeah, so actually the Sean Porter, the CTO of Sensu, gives a demo of monitoring Kubernetes with Sensu Go. And it's on YouTube, and I don't like have the link right here, but like that's like one of their active demos, and that's their target case is like with the way that the industry is going with Kubernetes and everything's a container, how does something like Sensu continue to play into that? And the current battle is Prometheus versus Sensu, being that Prometheus is part of like the CNCF. They kind of have the advantage there, but we'll see. I will still be a fanboy, just so we're clear. That will never die. But Prometheus is also very powerful. And if you can show me a really truly HA setup with Alert Manager that fully fails over, I will be impressed. Cool. How much time do I have? Oh my God, why didn't you? It's 7:03. All right. The Sensu advantage. So I don't know where the coffee picture went. But yeah, it's built on solid open source technologies, which means you have a whole community behind all of those. Just don't pin to an old version and then fall way behind. We do that all the time. It's super painful. So because of that, like the upstream RabbitMQ docs are actually really good if you run 3.7. If you write anything below 3.7, good luck. But like the open source community is a lot of fun. I love being part of it. Everyone's got an IRC room or a Slack room that you can join and be a part of. It's easily configurable to make it HA. Like you just spin up the nodes. Everything's stateless except for Redis. So if you can somehow offload the Redis responsibility, you're good. Or just kind of figure out how to run Redis. The JSON API for me is like the biggest win. I can finally interact with the system and actually do stuff with it and not wait 22 seconds for that response. And then it's very flexible. So like the whole thing is like it's an engine. So like you can put plugins in there. You can configure everything about it. You can add extensions which load right into the Ruby runtime and crash the whole thing or hopefully make it run better. And you can monitor everything. So like you don't have to be able to install the client to have a client monitoring something. A external client, so like let's say you have like a centralized host, you can have it monitoring like routers and switches that can't run the Sensu client. Although it is supported on a ton of platforms, you couldn't run it on your router or your switch. You can have it monitoring external containers, but having them appear as like dedicated host objects within like the actual ecosystem to operate independently. And there's a ton of power with like that type of model as well. And then for me, hosts register themselves. Sensu doesn't have to know about the hosts. As the hosts spin up, they register themselves in a secure channel using RabbitMQ, and then we're good to go from there. No centralized knowledge. Does anyone really care about securing Sensu? Otherwise, I'll skip over this.
Is
enable.
Is it possible to secure sense?
Yeah, enable TLS, enable client cert verification. Ensure you have signed certs on all of them and trust the CI in your Sensu nodes. You can do all that with RabbitMQ. Disable the TCP and UDP sockets because they don't have any auth. That's a feature I PR'd into the Sensu platform. And then you can enable the HTTP endpoint and basic user auth on that one. Enable safe mode, which means that clients have to know about the checks as well as the Sensu servers, and they execute their local definition. This prevents being used as a command and control center. Client signature is something you can configure on the Sensu client such that when they first register, they give a hashed version of the signature. From then forth, every single check result that comes from that client has to be signed with that hash. If it's not, it's rejected from the Sensu platform and logged. Don't allow the API access without a proxy connection with TLS and authentication. That's not built in. That's an enterprise feature, so run Nginx. And then use AWS Elasticache to get encryption for Redis communication. And if you work at Palantir, you can check all the InfoSec boxes with this one slide. That only took me 2 months to come up with. So that's a huge time save. And then, oh my God, I just keep going. I'm really sorry, guys. Isn't this one cool, though? It was like the Sensu Advantage. Splash.
It's like it's got a crown. Wearing it. Do you pay for like getting images?
No, I think I'm supposed to, too. So someone's pissed. But yeah, we're going to skip that. Where we go from here, this is the end of it. Okay, so forward looking, right now I'm working on a free IPA migration. If you run free IPA and you know what version 3 is, you'll know that it was released many, many years ago and totally unsupported by the community. That's what we run. So we're going to go up to 4.5.2, which will be scary as hell. See me in a couple of months. I'll be super stressed out when I'm doing it.
For a company that spends $30 million a month on AWS, what do you run free IPA?
That is not an accurate number. But why do we run free IPA? So there is an interesting story I have about design decisions where it is when you are sitting in a room and you are coming up with your very initial proof of concept, know that as soon as someone's paying you for that initial proof of concept, pivoting becomes super difficult if you fucked it up. And to me, free IPA was one of like the core things that someone decided upon simply by yum installing it and then installing the client on all the hosts. And what happened was over the last 5-6 years, we've integrated with it really tightly. We use it for certs. So we don't use Vault. We don't use anything cool like that. We use it for certs, Kerberos auth, SSH, like FP records so that you don't have to like accept the host key. We use it for everything. And the problem is that it was there. So because it's there, we built into it. And we built into it really hardcore. We built into its DNS. It's everything. So we're bought into it as far as I'm concerned until we get to 4.5.2. where a lot of other options start opening up. Specifically, I might just hardcode everyone's password and username into Etsy Passwords and Etsy Shadow because I am way sick of it failing to authenticate users. But I can give a different presentation on everything I hate about a free IPA. We're going to continue deprecating CentOS 6. Hopefully the next time, if I'm here in a year, CentOS 6 will be out the door and I can finally use dict comprehensions across all of my hosts. We're overhauling the way we patch to reduce manual intervention. I don't want to tell you the story about how we patched Meltdown, but there's a lot of humans promoting a lot of packages and doing a lot of things over SSH. That was not fun. I don't want to do that again. So the interesting thing about the tmux shit is that today I was on 30 instances over SSH's root, and I had to yum uninstall some crazy package that was installed back in 2015 and just forgotten about that was bringing the hosts down. And they weren't running Puppet, so I couldn't deploy it through config management. So I just synchronized a tmux session and just did it on a big monitor. Yeah. Sometimes you just got to get the job done, man. So to cap that off, auto remediation by default for all checks going forward, which means that you have to deploy a check and it has to be able to self-heal if it fails with a basic attempt. If that's just kicking the service, fine, so be it. If that's like syncing the time, good. I don't really care. But the first thing it can't do is page a human. And then continuing to break out all of our centralized components to putting them out into our Palantir installations so that when things break, they don't bring down things that shouldn't come down. Thanks for coming and listening to me ramble for apparently way too long without Mario flagging that to me at all. Here's a bunch of stuff of ways you can connect to me. You can stalk me on GitHub. That's quite fun for me. You can judge all of my Ansible code. Some of it's really good. Some of it is absolutely terrible. If this interests you or you want to like break production with me, palantir.com/careers. We're currently hiring in like the West Coast, the East Coast, and London for my team specifically, and then for many other teams across the company. This is like a really cool picture of coffee, and then this is a really cool picture of coffee beans. Any remaining questions?
I got one.
Yeah.
So you were asking if there's a way to run Alert Manager in HA.
The full stack, not just alert manager. I want the
that's
whole
fine.
thing.
Have you heard of Thanos?
No.
Look up Thanos. That's
Okay.
actually, it's not like Prometheus 2.5, but it is a project deeply coupled with Prometheus.
It's federated.
It's meant to do federated Prometheus. So essentially Prometheus is it's a Prometheus cluster.
It's not going to do the whole sharding thing that Nagios likes to say is HA, where it's like, oh, this other instance runs check disk, but this other one runs check. Interesting.
Aggregate other clusters too. But it will also like save all that stuff off to like a.
So
Oh,
to
neat.
be clear, Thanos is clustered Prometheus DB. I was curious about the alert manager.
Yeah.
And you can specify multiple alert managers in the config. So I'm assuming you could have, like backups, and then it'll try to get one and fails, and another fails. Like,
Nice.
I imagine that's the way
Okay.
it would work.
Yeah. Cool.
We want like layer in Orchestructure stack.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. Anyone else have questions? I can ramble on for forever. Like, if you guys want to stay till 9, like, I'll just keep going.
We can go for some time.
I might need more. Yeah. No? Nothing else? Nothing else?
We'll be hanging out afterward.
All right. Yeah. I'll stay around.
Well, okay. So I have a question.
Yeah.
How many people here want to hear more about monitoring actually would be interested in an hour and a half workshop kind of interactive session to do something like Sensu or Prometheus? I'm guessing most of you, since you're here listening to Jared.
I would love a Prometheus talk, just to be clear.
That's cool because
Yeah.
I would probably volunteer you to give it.
Oh, shit. James Turnbull, if anyone's familiar with him, just released a book like Monitoring with Prometheus or something Prometheus. And he wrote Nagios Pro way back when. So if you read Nagios Pro in a past life, he just wrote the Prometheus one. I just bought it, and so far it's really good, but like I'm just like through chapter 1. But if you're interested in reading more.
Yeah, I think so. Monitoring is one of those things that we all don't get to in time generally at our respective architecture that we're managing. So I think a lot more people are trying to be more conscious of it now, especially with Kubernetes and Prometheus and alerting, and Datadog is actually kind of the go-to for the SaaS-based solution. And Sensu, I feel like, is a great solution for a lot of people on-prem.
It can solve a lot of problems that like if you have, if you've got a data center and the cloud, like all of a sudden you're like, great, like now how do I monitor these legacy systems, and like what do I use to monitor my cool K8s like infrastructure? And like in a way, maybe you want one platform to do it all, maybe you don't. And like what I don't want to pitch and what I don't want to come off is that Sensu is the one-stop solution for all of your stuff. It's not. I had to fight for it for our internal infrastructure, and it works out, but it might not work out for you. I would say test them all out. Spin up Vagrant images of them all and give them a shot. This is Uchiwa. To cap that off, this is one of my servers. It's currently not paging me. But like the coolest thing is that you can like regex search in here. So I only have 3 hosts, so it's like nothing. But like you can do like starts with like text and then like it regex searches, but you can do like negative look aheads and stuff like that. But yeah, it's like the interface if anyone's actually interested in what that looks like. So
That's actually really nice. And that's all open source. Everything Sensu is open source.
all open source. There's an enterprise version that is closed source, but it's built on the open source core. So you get everything in the core plus a lot of custom. Effectively, it's like getting from 0 to 1 really quickly with Sensu is you buy enterprise because they build all the integrations in. You like put in a JSON config for Datadog and it just works. Same for PagerDuty. So if you want a super fast experience, you can pay for it. Yeah.
So he knows the CTO really well too. He'll tell you that very openly, as you mentioned. No, thank you for coming, Jared, and thank you for talking about Sensu. That was a fantastic talk. So once a year we'll have you back and we'll laugh at how terrible.
One day it won't be.
One day it won't be terrible, but you're leading the charge.
Our
so
pages are down, but I'm not sure if that's because Nagios is down or not. We'll find out. Yeah, sweet.
Cool. So I don't really have much. Our next meetup is July, whatever the last Wednesday is that month. We will have Andrew Sardone